You turn the key on a cold morning, and for half a second you hear it. That faint metal tick before the oil catches up. You tell yourself it's nothing. I told myself the exact same thing for years, every single winter. It wasn't nothing. Right now, across this country, more than 1 million engines are on track to fail this year alone. Recalls stacking on recalls. Trucks, sedans, family SUVs. And here's the part nobody says out loud. The single biggest thing killing these engines isn't a factory defect. It's something ordinary drivers do every morning without thinking. There was a habit, common as dirt 70 years ago, that protected an engine for almost nothing. Then it was quietly dropped from the manuals. I found it spelled out in an automobile encyclopedia, first printed back in the 1920s, written by a man named A. Bal Dyke. Stay with me, because by the end of this I'll show you the one thing you can do this weekend, in your own driveway, with the car already sitting there, that could add years to whatever you drive. You don't need a single tool you don't already own. Let me back up. Back in the winter of 1979, I was standing in my Uncle Ray's cold garage in Dayton, Ohio, watching him do something I thought was insane. He'd start his old Chevy, let it settle, and then before he ever pulled out of the driveway, he'd say the same thing every time. Give it a good hard run today, or she'll gum up on you. I was maybe 19. I thought he was a superstitious old man talking to a machine. I didn't understand it then. I understand it now, and it took me almost 4 decades and a dead engine of my own to figure out he was right. Because here's what I did wrong for most of my life. I did everything the modern, convenient, expensive way. I drove gentle to be kind to the car. I trusted the little light that told me when to change the oil. I let the dealer tell me the schedule. And I paid for it. I paid for it with a $2,000 repair bill and a lesson I should have learned in that garage in 1979. So let me tell you what's actually happening under the hood of nearly every car built in the last 15 years, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Somewhere around 2008, the way engines are built changed in a big way. The industry moved almost entirely to something called gasoline direct injection. On the older engines, fuel got sprayed in a spot where it constantly washed over the back of the intake valves and kept them clean, like rinsing a plate under the tap. The new design sprays fuel straight into the cylinder instead. More power, better mileage on paper. But it means nothing rinses those intake valves anymore, nothing at all. So what happens? A hard black crust of carbon builds up on those valves, year after year. I've seen photos of valves at 60,000 miles that look like they've got charcoal briquettes welded to them. The engine starts to stumble. It misfires. It loses power. And most people have no idea it's happening, because it comes on so slow you just think the car's getting old. I first noticed it on my own vehicle about 6 years ago. Rough idle at the stoplight. A little shudder when I pressed the gas from a dead stop. I figured it was the spark plugs. I figured it was bad gas. I figured everything except the truth, which is that my valves were caked in carbon because of how I drove and because of the fuel design I never asked for. Now, that's the machine. But understanding the machine isn't enough, because I still hadn't answered the question that kept me up at night. If people drove these same kinds of engines for 100 years without this problem, why is it suddenly killing 1 million engines a year? Something changed, and it wasn't just the fuel injection. Here's where it gets uncomfortable, because the answer has less to do with engineering and more to do with what somebody wanted you to believe. Let's talk about oil. When I was young, the standard motor oil was thick. You could feel it between your fingers. It coated everything, and it stayed there. Today, walk into any parts store and the shelves are full of oil so thin it's almost like water. 0W20, 0W16. Some engines now call for 0W8. which barely feels like oil at all. Why did that happen? Not because thin oil protects your engine better. It's because thin oil creates a little less drag inside the motor, and a little less drag squeezes out a tiny bit more fuel mileage. Fractions of a mile per gallon. And those fractions help automakers hit federal fuel economy targets that got tighter and tighter starting in the 2000s. That's the real reason the oil on the shelf got thin. It was never mainly about your engine lasting longer. It was about a number on a government sheet. I'm not making that up to sound dramatic. Think about who benefits. A slightly better mileage rating helps the company sell the car and avoid a penalty. Thin oil that wears an engine out a little faster? Well, by the time that engine's tired, your warranty's long gone and you're the one holding the bill, or you're back at the dealership shopping for the next one. Nobody in that chain has a reason to want your engine to run forever, except you. And then there's the oil change interval, which is the part that genuinely made me angry once I understood it. When my Uncle Ray was alive, everybody changed their oil every 3,000 miles. It was gospel. Now, the car's own computer will happily let you go 10,000, 12,000, even 15,000 miles on a single fill. They sell you that as convenience, less hassle, fewer trips to the shop. But here's what they don't put on the sticker. On these modern direct injection engines, especially the ones with turbos, raw fuel actually seeps down past the rings and dilutes your oil over time. It's a known problem. The oil gets thinner and dirtier than the dashboard light ever tells you. So you've got thin oil to start with, getting thinner from fuel dilution, being asked to protect a hotter, harder working engine for 3 or 4 times as long as we used to dare. And people wonder why a million engines are failing. I want to give you real numbers, because numbers are what convinced me. In the last couple of years alone, one major American manufacturer recalled roughly 700,000 trucks and big SUVs over engines that could fail, some of them catastrophically, with bearings coming apart inside the motor. And that's just one company, one engine family. Go back a few years and you'll find another manufacturer that recalled millions of vehicles across nearly a decade for engines that could seize or catch fire. Millions. Not a typo. When you add up all the engine actions across all the brands, the 1 million figure isn't scary marketing. If anything, it's conservative. So that's the trap. Fuel design that lets carbon build up. Oil made thin to help a mileage number. And service intervals stretch so long the oil's worn out before you ever change it. 3 quiet decisions, none of them made with your engine's long life in mind. And every one of them costs you money, either now at the pump or later at the repair shop. Now here's the good news, and this is the part my uncle knew and I didn't. You can fight back against all 3 of these problems with habits that cost you almost nothing. Habits that were common knowledge before any of us were sold on convenience. Let me walk you through exactly what I did and what actually happened when I tried it, because I was skeptical too. The first thing I changed was the oil interval, and I did it the old way. I stopped trusting the dashboard light. I went back to changing my oil at roughly 5,000 miles, and on my older engine that does a lot of short trips, closer to 4. People told me I was wasting money and wasting oil. So I actually did the math, and this is where it got interesting. An oil change I do myself in the driveway runs me about $40 in oil and a filter. Say I do that 3 or 4 times a year. Call it $150 a year. Now compare that to a single engine replacement, which on a modern vehicle runs anywhere from $6,000 to well over $10,000. Often more than the car is worth. So I'm spending $150 a year to protect a $10,000 asset. When I put it that way, the wasteful habit is the cheapest insurance I've ever bought in my life, and I've been paying it happily ever since. But changing the oil more often only solves one of the 3 problems. It does almost nothing for the carbon on those valves. And that's the one that had me stumped for the longest time, because the shops wanted $300 to $600 to do what they call a walnut blasting, where they literally blast crushed walnut shells at your valves to clean them off. $600. I nearly paid it. I'm glad I didn't, because the answer was sitting in that 1920s encyclopedia the whole time, and it was free. Picture yourself right now, standing at that service counter, watching a mechanic point at a screen and quote you a number for a carbon cleaning you didn't even know you needed. That sinking feeling in your gut, the one that says you're about to be charged for something you could have prevented for nothing. That's exactly the feeling this collection was built to end. It's called the Complete Engine Intelligence Library, and it takes everything I've been fumbling toward and lays it out plain. The Reset Manual hands you the oil protocol worth more than any pricey additive, the cooling checks that catch the failure nobody sees coming, and the warm-up routine mechanics knew before the manuals got thin. It even shows you how to head off a timing chain collapse for almost nothing. And here's a check you can run tonight, for free, in your own driveway. Pull your dipstick after a short cold trip, wipe it, and smell it. If it smells like gasoline, that's the fuel dilution I told you about, thinning your oil right now, and the books walk you through exactly how to stop it. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. And this matters today, not someday, because that carbon is hardening on your valves with every gentle short trip you take. Before I get to that root cause, I owe you an honest word about my own test. Before I get to that, I need to talk to you directly, because I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking this is fine for a fellow who's got a garage and a set of wrenches and a Saturday to kill. You're thinking, I don't do my own oil. I don't know a valve from a vacuum cleaner. This isn't for me. I want you to hear me clearly. This next part is for you especially. The person who feels locked out of taking care of their own car. Because the most powerful thing you can do doesn't require a single tool, a single part, or a single dollar. It only requires that you change how you drive for about 15 minutes. Here's the situation almost nobody realizes they're in. The way most of us drive today is the single worst possible way to treat one of these engines. We drive short, down to the store, over to the church, a few miles to a friend's house and a few miles back. Gentle on the gas the whole way because we think gentle is kind. And in the cold months we let it idle in the driveway to warm up while we scrape the windows. Every one of those habits, which we think of as careful and considerate, is quietly killing the motor. Here's why. Short trips never let the engine get fully hot. And when the engine never gets fully hot, two terrible things happen. Moisture from the air condenses inside the engine and mixes into your oil, because it never gets warm enough to boil that water off. And any raw fuel that slipped into the oil stays there for the same reason, thinning it out. So the careful little errands we run are exactly the trips that fill your oil with water and gas and leave it there. And driving gentle all the time, never letting the engine breathe hard, that's what lets the carbon settle in and harden on the valves and in the combustion chamber. Soft, cool, short driving is a recipe for a clogged, sludged, carbon-caked engine. Nobody ever told us that. They told us the opposite. They told us gentle was good. Now let me tell you what my Uncle Ray knew in that garage in 1979, and what I finally found written in black and white in Dyke's Automobile Encyclopedia from the 1920s. Back then, mechanics had a name for the cure. Some called it blowing out the carbon. Later mechanics gave it a nickname, the Italian tune-up, and the idea is almost laughably simple. Every so often, you take the engine, once it's fully warmed up, and you run it hard, on purpose. Here's exactly how I do it, and how you can do it this week with the car you already own. First, you drive normally for 10 or 15 minutes until the temperature gauge is all the way up to its normal running spot. This is not optional. You never do this on a cold engine, ever. Once it's good and hot, you find a safe stretch of open road or an on-ramp where you can legally get up to highway speed. And then, in a lower gear if you can manage it, you press the accelerator down firmly and let the engine climb up high, higher than you'd ever normally take it, and hold it there for a few seconds at a time. You do that a handful of times over the course of your drive. Then you let it cool down normally. What you're doing is creating enough heat and enough exhaust pressure inside the engine to actually burn and blow loose the carbon deposits that gentle driving lets build up. That old encyclopedia described running the engine hard to keep the carbon from accumulating in the first place. It wasn't a secret trick back then. It was just maintenance. Everybody understood that an engine, like a workhorse, needed to be run out now and then, or it would go soft and clog up. Now, I'll be honest with you about my own test, because I promised I would. The first time I tried this, I felt ridiculous. I'm a careful driver. My whole life I babied my cars. Flooring it on an empty on-ramp on purpose felt wrong, like I was doing damage. My hands were tight on the wheel. But I'd read enough to know the engine was built to handle far more than I was giving it, so I did it. 3 or 4 hard pulls up to highway speed on a warm engine, on a quiet Sunday morning on a road I knew was empty. I did it once a week for about a month, and here's what actually happened. That shutter off the line, the one I'd blamed on spark plugs and bad gas for 2 years, it smoothed out, not all at once. But by the 4th week, the car pulled away from a stoplight clean, the way it did when it was newer. The rough idle at the light settled down. I didn't spend $600. I didn't spend $6. I just drove the way my uncle told me to drive in 1979, and the engine thanked me for it. And that stopped me cold, because I realized this man, with a 6th grade education and a wrench, understood something about these machines that a modern dashboard warning light will never tell you. He knew the engine needed to be worked. The knowledge was never lost because it stopped being true. It was lost because it stopped being profitable to remind you. Think about it. A habit that costs nothing, that keeps your valves clean and your engine strong, doesn't sell you a $600 cleaning service. It doesn't sell you a new car 3 years early. It doesn't sell you anything at all, which is exactly why you won't find it printed in bold in your glove box manual, even though a man wrote it down plainly 100 years ago. So let me put together the whole picture for you, because now you've got all the pieces I wish I'd had 20 years ago. You know the engine's weak spot now. Direct injection that lets carbon cake up on the valves with nothing to wash it off. You know the oil's been made thin to serve a fuel mileage number instead of your engine's lifespan. And you know the service intervals got stretched so long that the oil's worn out and watered down before the light ever comes on. 3 problems, all of them working against you, all of them quiet. And you know the 3 defenses, every one of them cheap or free. Change the oil more often than the computer says, closer to the old 5,000-mile rhythm, and don't be shy about it. Take the longer drives when you can, and let the engine get all the way hot before you ask anything of it, so the water and fuel boil out of the oil the way they're supposed to. And every couple of weeks, once it's warm, give it that hard run the old mechanics swore by. Blow the carbon out before it ever gets a chance to harden. But I saved the best for last, and this is the piece that genuinely surprised me, because it goes one step deeper than the Italian tune-up. It's the thing that finally tied together why my uncle's generation almost never dealt with the failures we're seeing today, and I found the root of it in that same old encyclopedia and in the driving manuals from that era. Here's the secret. It's not just that they ran their engines hard. It's when they did it and why. The old-timers understood that the most dangerous moment in an engine's entire life is the first 2 or 3 minutes after a cold start. In those first minutes, before the oil has fully circulated and coated everything, the metal parts are grinding against each other with almost no protection. Studies on engine wear have found that a huge share of the total wear an engine ever suffers happens right there, in that cold startup window, not out on the highway, where we imagine the strain is. So what did the old manuals teach that we completely forgot? Two things, and they're both free. First, they taught that you never ever rev or load a cold engine. You start it, you give it just a few seconds to build oil pressure, and then you drive away gently and slowly, letting the engine warm under a light, easy load, rather than sitting and idling. Modern idling in the driveway to warm it up actually keeps the engine cold longer and dumps raw fuel into the cylinders while it's running rich. The old way, an easy, gentle roll for the first mile or two, warms it faster and safer. We were taught the exact opposite by convenience culture, and it's backwards. And second, here's the part that ties the whole thing together, the piece I'll leave you with. The old mechanics knew that an engine you're going to run hard must first be brought up to full temperature slowly and completely. The cold start, gentle. The warm engine worked hard. They matched their driving to the engine's temperature, every single trip, without a gauge telling them to. Cold means baby it. Hot means run it. That rhythm, gentle when cold and hard when hot, is the single most protective thing you can do for any engine ever built, and it doesn't cost 1 red cent. It was standard knowledge in the 1920s, written down for anyone to read, and today almost nobody under the age of 70 does it on purpose. I tried it, all of it. The shorter oil intervals, the gentle cold starts instead of idling, the full warm-up, and the hard run once a week. My rough idle is gone. My pickup off the line is back. And an engine that a shop once hinted was heading for trouble is running, by my honest count, better today than it did 3 years ago. I spent almost nothing. I just stopped driving the way I was sold and started driving the way my uncle drove. Let me say the thing I really want you to walk away with. You didn't lose this knowledge because it stopped working. You lost it because a man who runs his engine right for 20 years is a man who isn't buying a new one, isn't paying for a carbon service, and isn't fattening anybody's bottom line but his own. That's the whole story. The knowledge was written down, plain as day, 100 years ago. It got pushed aside on purpose, and now it's back in your hands, where it belongs. If you're the kind of person who's always felt in your gut that things used to be built to last, that somewhere along the way, convenient started meaning disposable, and that a lot of what we've been sold as progress was really just a slow way of separating us from our money, then you already understand what this channel is about. We're not experts up on a hill. We're just people digging the useful old knowledge back out of the ground before it's gone for good. So here's what I want to know from you. When you were young, did you have an Uncle Ray? A father, a grandfather, a neighbor who talked to his engine and did something with his car that you thought was crazy at the time but now makes you wonder? Tell me what it was. Drop it down in the comments, because somebody reading is going to need exactly that piece of wisdom, and you might be the one who saved their engine. And tell me where you're watching from while you're at it. I love seeing how far this old knowledge travels. If this helped you, subscribe and stand with the folks who are reclaiming the things we were quietly talked out of, one forgotten method at a time. Because next time, I'm going to show you the almost free trick for your car's transmission that the old-timers used to make a gearbox last 250,000 miles, and it's another one you won't find in your owner's manual. You won't want to miss it. Take care of that engine. It'll take care of you a lot longer than they ever wanted it to. Before you go, one thing. This video showed you what's happening under the hood, But inside, I walk you through Uncle Ray's driveway carbon clearing routine, step by step. The exact thing you can do this weekend. That's waiting in the old ways society. Got a question about your own car? You ask me, and a real person answers, not a machine. You belong in here with us. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. Cancel anytime, one click, no risk. Now, you know how serious this engine crisis really is. But there's one small dollar fix that could save your turbo engine from failing early. I'll show you exactly what it is right here.